Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 597. And today's date is February 20th, 2015. And the title of this episode is U.S. Government Central Bankers Preparing for a Major Offensive in Mosul, Iraq. Let's get right into the economic collapse news. Now, when we look at the Eurozone and we look at Greece, they finally have come to an agreement, a temporary agreement. They're going to get a bailout, which is going to extend their time for about 4 months. Greece and Eurozone finance ministers struck a deal to extend the Greek bailout. Athens is expected to present a first list of reform measures by Monday for the country's debt inspectors to assess. The EU creditors have insisted that any extension of loans should be accompanied by Greece's commitment to a certain set of budget measures and reforms. The newly elected leftist government in Athens initially asked for 6 months, but they received 4 months. The Friday's agreement removes the immediate risk of Greece running out of money as early as March. So we can see right now the Greek government, they have a time frame where they can recoup, they can look at all their options, get everything prepared to go with Russia. And I wouldn't be surprised if this is what they've been working on and they needed this time frame to do this, and this is why they came up with this agreement. But we could see that right now Greece is exactly where it was before. They have 4 more months. The people still do not have jobs. There is no economic growth, and Greece is continually going into debt. So nothing has really changed at this time, except they have some time. That's it. Now we see out in the UK that retail sales have fallen by 0.3%, and we see in Canada retail sales dropped most in 4 years. The Canadian retail sales fell as the fastest pace in more than 4 years in December, as consumers decide, you know what, I just don't have enough money to go out and pay for those holiday gifts. Sales fell 2% on holiday spending. Well, now we understand why Target decided to close all their stores, because guess what? People are not purchasing. Receipts fell by 5.6%. for clothing and accessory stores, and 9.2% at electronics and appliance retailers. Sales fell in 9 of the 11 categories, making up 71% of retail trade in December. So where everyone thought their country was safe and everything was fine and they're not really being hurt from what's going on here, well, we see completely the opposite of what's going on. We see that countries are starting to feel it. And eventually what's going to happen is this is going to accelerate, because people are just not going to go all of a sudden and say, hey, I just got this incredible job. Now I'm making a lot more money. Let's go spend. It doesn't work that way. Right now, businesses are laying off. Retail manufacturers closing down. And this is not going to stop. It's going to continue as we go along. February's market in the U.S. manufacturing PMI printed at 54.3, a little bit above the 53.6 expectations, but under the covers it is a very different story, with new orders dropping to their lowest level since January of 2014 and employment falling. The rate of economic growth remains well down on last year. One of markets' notes is this: the U.S. economy has entered a slow growth phase. Actually, we've been realizing this for a long time. It's not just slow, it is imploding. And we can see that when we look around, nothing is happening. The Baltic Dry Index is at its lowest point, ever. And we can see that retail is continually closing, and it's not getting better. Already, we see Goldman Sachs out there trying to explain away why all this is happening. And of course, they're going back to what? Oh, the weather. And they're saying, well, you know what? We might have to revise Q1 GDP because of the cold, because of the snow. Well, again, the entire country is not blank. It does not have snowstorms all over the place. The entire country does not have cold all over the place. Yes, certain sections of time they might have cold, but not for extended periods. And this doesn't stop people from ordering online. or going out. Just because it's cold, people still go out. So their whole story right now is completely, absolutely ridiculous. And if this was true, people sitting in their houses, they'd be ordering left and right online. We would see online sales skyrocket because they can't get out there, right? It's too cold. It's wintry. So what the easiest thing to do is just push a button, have it delivered to your door. But guess what? We are not seeing this whatsoever. They know the economy is slowing. They know it is collapsing. And they're trying to use any excuse possible to explain away why this is happening. Listen, everything they've been trying to do with suppressing gas, by letting everyone know we're in a recovery when we're not, it's not working. They're trying to prop up the entire system with manipulated numbers, by pushing real estate to its highest point, by holding back foreclosures, by having investment companies, hedge funds, purchase homes with cash, hold on to them, or try to rent them out. They were doing everything they possibly can to continually prop up the economy, but it's not working. And we can see from the dock worker strike, it's actually making it worse. So the U.S. Labor Secretary is now threatening the dock workers, saying, listen, you need to negotiate and you need to come up with a solution, or we're going to bring you to Washington and we will make the solution for you. And we're going to have to watch this to see if they actually come up with some type of an agreement, because they're very nervous that if this goes on for much longer, the entire economy will start collapsing, and they are not ready. The event did not happen. They haven't provoked North Korea, Russia, China enough to start a war. It would all be blamed on them. Wait a minute, you're telling us in recovery and there's one strike and the entire economy falls apart because it snowed and people went on strike? It makes no sense. And when we look at all the real economic indicators and we go back in time, what do we see? We see that, yeah, this economy is dead. It is going nowhere. It's a zombie economy. Of course, the U.S. government central bankers, they tried to kickstart it, and it didn't work. The collapse in the U.S. retail sector has accelerated throughout this plunge in oil gas prices. This shouldn't be possible. As prices go down, products actually become cheaper. People are supposed to be saving money and have extra money to spend, but we're not seeing this. But you know why? Because the people don't have the jobs. Actually, what stores are doing right now, they're taking advantage of this. They're trying to make as much profit as they possibly can. And this is why we see prices maybe come down a little bit, or sometimes not at all. Actually, it was so bad, UPS is actually adding an extra charge, even though gas prices are coming down. I remember when gas prices were very low and gas prices went up, they said they had to add an extra charge because it's more expensive. But when gas prices come down and they say they have to add an extra charge, we know something's wrong. What does it mean when an economy not only fails to respond to automatic stimulus, but continues to rapidly decompose? It means we are dealing with a deceased economy. Evidence of the U.S. zombies economy is both overwhelming and abundant. First, it begins with 0% interest. How long have we had 0% interest? Has it helped? No, it hasn't. Actually, you know what it's protecting? It's protecting the central banking system. Because as we know, when interest rates go up, things start to fall apart. What happened in 2007 going to 2008? Interest rates started going up. What did people do? They just left their homes. They couldn't afford the payments. They were out. Number two, U.S. heartbeat, the flow of money, has nearly stopped, having fallen further lower than at any time in recorded history. What does it mean when money stops moving? Well, it means that the economy is dead. It means that the heart of the greatest capitalist empire the world has ever seen is dead. That's what it means. Number three, gas-guzzling consumer economy is dead. and it comes from gasoline consumption numbers themselves. Official U.S. gasoline consumption has plummeted by nearly 75% from its absolute peak in July of 1998. The gasoline consumption numbers have plummeted roughly 66% since the start of the U.S. recovery. Yeah, we can see that this whole thing is falling apart. The U.S. retail sector, the cornerstone of this consumer economy, is completely collapsing and imploding itself. Look what happened Black Friday. Look what happened the holiday season. Look what is happening with the number of stores closing. It's getting worse, not better. The plunge in real estate, we see prices coming down. We see the declining mortgage applications. We see buyer traffic drying up. You know what all this means? It means the bankrupt consumer does not have any more money in their wallet. They are tapped out. This is what we are seeing. And you know what the central bankers are very worried about right now? They are terrified of bonds. They're afraid of the bond market. Greece sovereign debt crisis. Germany is terrified of what a Greek default would do to the EU banks. The Bank of Japan is purchasing all new debt issuance in Japan. The Fed is terrified of higher interest rates because ever 1% change means over $100 billion more in interest payments on the U.S. debt. Indeed, the U.S. issued a total of $1 trillion in new debt over an 8-week period in late 2014. The reasons it did this, because it doesn't have the money to pay off the debt that is coming due from the past. So it simply issues new debt to raise the money to pay back the old debt. This is a Ponzi scheme. But the U.S. is not alone in this regard. Globally, the sovereign debt bubble is over 100 trillion in size. Just about every major nation on the planet is sporting a debt to GDP ratio of 100% plus. And that is just including on the balance sheet of debt, not unfunded liabilities like Medicare or Social Security. This is why the Fed and every other central bank on earth is terrified of interest rates rising, because anything even resembling the normalization of interest rates would mean entire countries are going to go bust. QE, when they implemented that, was never meant to create jobs. It was never meant to hit the everyday population. It wasn't to generate economic growth. It was a desperate ploy by central banks to put a floor under the bond market so rates wouldn't rise. They have been keeping this economy stagnant. Actually, it's declining now. They're losing control. And they know it. They know that one small black swan or an event will make this economy come tumbling down. It will not survive. And they know this. And this is why they are trying so hard to push war wherever they are. They don't want peace. They want a war to go. And this is why we see the White House pushing for war, the authorization for war. This is why they're in Ukraine, provoking Russia. This is why they have the pivot to China, and they're in Africa. They don't care where it happens as long as it starts, because all the players are the same. Now, on the other hand, we see Russia and now Europe, some of the countries in Europe, which are now leaning towards Russia. They're starting to make deals with Russia because they're looking at the current situation and they're saying, maybe we should do something, because we see the dollar is actually collapsing and the U.S. is only talking war. Well, we see the German group, Nordic Yards, which has 3 shipyards in Germany, may build its own dockyard in Russia. They said they are going to consider building their own site because the trend towards increasing local output is gaining momentum in Russia. The Nordic Yards head also said he did not rule out establishing a joint venture with the Russian shipyard and buying a stake in it. So we can see right now they are making deals. They are saying, you know something? We're a little bit nervous. We see what's going on here. The dollar is dying because every fiat currency ends up dying sooner or later. Usually lasts, 30, 40 years. Here we are at the end game. And everyone is starting to realize this. All the countries are starting to say, you know something, where are these sanctions getting us? Where is this getting us? And we don't want to go into war at this point. Now, we know that Russia created their own SWIFT system, ChronoPay. And right now, and this didn't take long, SWIFT is suing Russia because they're using a name very similar to ChronoSwift, which is ChronoPay. And they're saying they shouldn't be using this. It's against their trademark, and they're going to sue them. And we knew something like this was going to happen because they set up their own payment system separate and apart from SWIFT, because the U.S. government central bankers thought, ooh, we have Russia. Without SWIFT, they won't be able to survive. But guess what? It is live, and it's doing transactions with 91 different entities right now. And it will expand, and they know this, and they're nervous about this. Russia just ratified the $100 billion BRICS New Development Bank. And we can see that this will be fully functional by the end of 2015. And what else do we know by the end of 2015? That's right, the IMF is going to look at the yuan renminbi. They're going to say, does this meet all the requirements of becoming a reserve currency? Now, of course, the U.S. is going to do whatever they possibly can to stop this because they don't want this to happen. Because already in place, what does China have? Trade agreements with many, many countries across the globe. New Zealand, Australia, Switzerland, Canada, UK, France, you name it, Russia, they have it. They've already prepared for this. They're purchasing gold because they know eventually they're going to have to back this with some type of, with some form of gold. And Russia's planning the same thing. And we can see right now, the U.S. government central bankers, they're getting nervous. They tried to have some type of regime change in Russia and China. It didn't work out. And we can see they are getting nervous at this point. Are they weaker? Yeah, a little bit. Because everything they tried to do has not worked out. But again, it doesn't mean they won't try a false flag as a last-ditch effort to push war. And when everything else fails, this is what they're going to do. Now, we know that Obamacare was created to bring in revenue and to give insurance companies plenty of profits and impose taxes on the people while they give us crappy insurance. And this is why the government exempted themselves, because they didn't want it. And right now they have a lot of glitches. And we can see that the Obama administration sent 800,000 healthcare gov customers incorrect tax forms. And they're telling the people to hold off on filing your returns at this point. So here is another glitch. It's not working out. Actually, this is completely unconstitutional because they placed a tax on healthcare. They can call it a penalty. They can call it whatever they want. It is a tax on the people. Now, a Snowden document reveals that the United States government, along with Britain, their spy agencies, the NSA and GCHQ, they basically got into SIM cards, into the manufacturer, and stole the encryption keys used to secure voice calls and texts. And they did this from the largest manufacturer of SIM cards. And basically what this means is they have the ability to break the encryption and listen in on everyone's call. Now, China bought nearly half of these SIM cards, and they're able to listen in on everything they're doing. And this is why other countries are taking steps to create their own technology, and they're not really ordering the technology from the United States because they know most of it has spyware in it. Even Lenovo, their laptop, their notebooks have some sort of tracking software in there. Most of the people who have laptops today, using like Seagate, Western Digital, IBM, many other hard drives, we know the U.S. government central bankers have placed firmware in the hard drive, and they can see everything without using your operating system. So no matter what spyware, whatever protections you have, it will not stop them because they bypass this. And I remember years ago I used a system called BART, which I would be able to take a CD, plug it into any computer, and it would load up a separate OS system, and I can see the entire drive bypassing everything on the computer or server. And this is exactly what they're doing. Now, we understand that the FBI likes to take certain people in. They might have a criminal record, and they may make a deal with them, and they use them as patsies. And there is a 28-year-old cyber hacker who currently serving about 6 months prison sentence, says the FBI approached him and they asked him to gather information on elected officials, cartel members, anyone that he can get data from that would help them out. Now, if they did this, they would drop all charges. If he didn't do this, well, guess what? They would impose charges on him. He decided not to go along with the FBI, and they imposed charges on him. So basically, it was kind of like blackmail. Do what we say, or we're going to put you in prison. And they put him in prison. His name was Salinas, Fidel Salinas, and he came out saying, yes, the FBI wanted him to do certain things, and they do this to many people. And this is why they, when they come out saying, oh, they stopped a new terrorist plot, these are people that might have criminal records where they're saying, listen, we'll make a deal with you, we'll drop all charges if you do what we say. Or they find gullible people who say, listen, I've seen that you're posting something, that you're really angry, you're a loner, and we'll help you out. And they pretend there's somebody else, they help them out, and then they arrest them later. The same thing is happening here, and we see this continually ongoing throughout whatever the FBI does. And we know a lot of this stuff is completely fake, phony, and false. Now, as we know, the United States government central bankers, they would love to get the weapons away from the people. And the only thing standing in the way is that pesky Second Amendment, which gives the rights to everyone to bear arms. And they can't stand it. And they create thousands upon thousands of laws to get around it. And for those people who do not believe that they're trying to get weapons away from the people, it's very hard not to believe it, because when you start to break it down and you look at the entire story of what they've been doing, it creates a picture of exactly trying to ban every single weapon from the American people. Now, when we look at this, we see, of course, they're trying to limit the amount of ammunition people can have. If they can take away weapons, they would, but they know they can't. So they create laws. And we see New York State right now, who's one of the states that is a leader in doing this, decided that they're going to create a new bill which basically will outlaw knives longer than 4 inches. Even a simple kitchen knife would be in violation of administrative code and would face up to 15 days in jail and $300 fines. So this includes machetes, butcher knives, anything like that whatsoever. So right now they're trying to get rid of knives. So they're trying to get rid of guns. They're trying to get rid of knives. So let's put all this together. They're trying to ban guns, and they're imposing many, many laws. They're trying to limit the number of bullets in a magazine. If they could, they would just get rid of the weapon. They make it very, very hard to get a weapon. They try to go down the route of finding people that are not mentally stable. People who are not mentally stable could not own a weapon. They put a ban on ammunition. They are shutting down gun shops using Operation Choke Point. They decided to ban body armor. And now they're taking away knives. So when you look at all this, what else are they doing here? Are they doing it just because it sounds great to do? Or is it really being done to take away the weapon from the everyday person. And this is really what they're trying to do. They don't want the people to be armed, because when the collapse comes, they realize that they want to be in control of the situation. They don't want people fighting back. And what's funny is they keep using the propaganda of terrorists, even in the UK, where they don't have weapons. And a lot of people are saying, listen, if there's going to be terrorists here, maybe we should get our weapons back so I can protect my family. Because the armed forces and the police force, they can't be everywhere. So wouldn't it make sense to have us wear body armor and hold a weapon? And that goes the same here in the United States. Why would they take away bulletproof vests if there are lone wolf groups already inside the United States who want to do the American people harm? I mean, of course, if you're believing their side of the story. So we can use it really against them. If this is true, I want to protect my family. I want body armor, I want a knife, and I want a gun. But again, they're doing it to take away the weapons from the people because they don't want them fighting back. And what they want to do is they want to track everything you do, to keep an eye on you. I mean, U.S. citizens and other non-EU nationals who enter Europe will be asked to have their face images captured and fingerprints scanned upon arrival at half a dozen major airports. This is a test case. The biometric dragnet is part of a pilot test of the EU so-called Smart Borders package. Passengers now can refuse it, but guess what? In the future, it's going to be mandatory, and that is coming very, very soon. The launch date is set in a matter of weeks, but the document is still in draft form. However, the document lists airports in Sweden, France, Germany, Portugal, Spain, Netherlands. The biometric screening extends to road, train, and sea routes, as well as and includes iris pattern scans in some areas. So you're trying to tell me they're not trying to track every single person? They're already implementing this in the United States with the Real ID system, where they're going to take your iris scan, your DNA, your face, your picture of your face for facial recognition. You'll have an RFID chip. You'll have a barcode just in case the RFID chip fails. Yes, and all this data will be exchanged all around the globe to track every single person, because the powers that be see us as the herd, the sheep. And of course, what do you do when you have a flock of sheep, a herd of sheep? You tag them, you track them, because you don't want to lose them. You want to know what each and every one is doing. And this is what the central bankers, the power elite, are doing right now. They've convinced the governments to do this. You have to remember, the governments are just a pawn. There are people above this, the central banking system, which is made up of many different people, who control the power structure, who want certain things done. We see Denmark. The Danish government announced Thursday that it will spend nearly $148 million over the next 4 years to better defend Denmark against terrorism. So we see each one of these countries doing the same thing. They're putting troops on the ground. They're preparing for people who are going to riot. Civil disobedience. They got to keep them in line. They got to control them. And this is why we see these terror threats happening all over the place. It's not to stop terrorism. It's for them to enact laws. It's to put troops on the ground and to control the people in each one of the countries. Okay, now out in Ukraine, the ceasefire is in place, but there's still shelling going on, and it has not stopped. And we see that out in the Donetsk area, up to about 90% of the industry does not operate as a result of armed actions. And they're saying it's going to take about a month to restore the factories and the production of the Donetsk area because what has been going on. But even so, the Donetsk people have decided to make deals with Iran, Turkey, and North Africa to supply coal to them. So once everything gets up and running, they will have revenue coming in. And of course, the Kiev government, who's not part of this, wants a piece of the action. They don't want this to be separate and apart because they need the production side. And this is what they've been fighting for. This is why they will not let parts of the country go, because the central bankers paid for Crimea, the southeast, the entire country, and they didn't get what they paid for. We see Kiev and the Donetsk people, well, they're going to try to put together an all-for-all prisoner swap on Saturday. We'll have to see how this goes, how this works out. In the past, it seemed to work out just fine where they exchanged the prisoners. There's no reason to keep them because right now they're in a ceasefire. The Donetsk people are saying, listen, the Ukraine forces deliver fire at the DPR cities and towns in the future, and if they do continually fire upon us, because they're still doing it with indiscriminate barraging of shells coming into our area, we're going to just call off the Minsk Accord. We're going to say, you know what, you're not holding up your side, and we're just going to cancel it, which I think is the worst thing they can do, because when this happens, the U.S. Central bankers, the Kiev government is going to say, they decided to quit the Minsk Agreement. And this is exactly why Kiev is doing this. They want them to say, listen, we're not abiding by the Minsk Agreement. We're out. And this is why they're continually shelling all of these areas. Now, Ukraine has signed an agreement to create a military brigade with Poland and Lithuania. This is going to be a joint military unit, the so-called Ukraine-Polish-Lithuania Brigade. The brigade is created for the purpose of participation in international operations carried out on the basis of the UN Security Council mandate and authorized bodies of Lithuania, Poland, and Ukraine. The agreement is open for other countries to join based on the invitation from members of the brigade. And you have to remember, Ukraine is really not a part of NATO. And I don't even know why NATO is even in there if they're not a part of it. It makes no sense whatsoever. Now, Kiev wants to have peacekeepers come into Ukraine. They were calling on the UN, but they said, you know what, we'd rather have the EU police mission rather than the UN peacekeeping force, because that's just going to take too long. And we know why this is what they want, because they're part of the, not almost part of the EU system, and this is why the whole coup was taking place. And I think what they want to do is sneak some of their military people into the southeastern area as the EU police go into the area to keep everything at peace. And I think they're using this as a tactic to get into this area. But the EU is out there saying, listen, we are not sending police into your region. You need to follow the Minsk Accord. And the Minsk Accord says, no, there are no peacekeeping forces. The only force that's in there is the OSCE, and they're the ones who are supposed to be in control of the situation in Kiev. Now, the Kiev ambassador to Germany was on a German TV station, and he said something very, very interesting. He was answering questions about the large presence of strange people with the SS insignia in the Ukrainian army. He admitted on TV that the right sector neo-Nazis are part of the Ukrainian armed forces and that they are controlled and coordinated by Kiev's pro-Western regime, and that without them, they wouldn't be able to hold off the southeastern, or I should say, the Russian army. Well, there was no Russian army. It was the southeastern people, but he just admitted that the neo-Nazi units are fighting together with the Kiev army that are controlled by the U.S. government. Think about this for a second. So we now have proof, confirmation, that these people are being controlled by the U.S. government central bankers. I mean, we knew this before, but he's out there telling people this. Unbelievable. Now, of course, the United States government central bankers are out there telling everyone that, yes, Russia has tanks, 20 more tanks, in Ukraine. And this is not from last week. This is from today. They're still using the propaganda that Russia is bringing in tanks. Now think about it. What would be the motive of Russia right now to do this? Because if they got caught doing this, and you know they have the U.S. government, central bankers, Kiev, NATO, they all have satellites right above there watching the situation. They're waiting for Russia to do something like this. I mean, if Russia did this, they would have been caught in a second. And they know this, and this entire ceasefire would go down the toilet. It would not be enforced at this point, and they would have no motivation to do this. It makes no sense. But of course they're using propaganda. Now, French President Hollande, he was, and German Chancellor Angela Merkel, they're unable to confirm any Russian military hardware in Ukraine. We had Turkey in there. We had other countries in there looking around. Russia said, sure, look at the borders. Go ahead. You can look all you want. There is nothing in there. Now, what's very interesting is the president of France, Hollande, said, if there are any type of military assets from either side in the country, from the U.S. or anyone else, there will be sanctions imposed on any country. You mean even the U.S.? Or is he really just talking about Russia? So it looks like France and Germany right now are playing both sides. U.S. and they're leaning towards Russia, trying to keep face with the U.S. and trying to make deals with Russia. And it seems like as time goes on, they'll most likely slide more and more towards the Russian side. Now, Obama has delegated the Ukraine Support Act reporting to John Kerry. And the Ukraine Freedom Support Act requires the president to submit periodic reports to U.S. Congress on the progress and strategies to support Ukraine and counter Russia. The report will include the anticipated provision of defense articles and military training for Ukraine. So right now, we still have the U.S. in Ukraine training troops. Of course, this is in violation of the Minsk Agreement. And the question is, are they going to be pulling these troops out of there? We have no word of this, and Kerry now is involved in the reporting and taking control of the Ukraine Freedom Act, which allows the U.S. government to send lethal weapons to Ukraine. We know the United States government central bankers are doing this covertly, but they want this out in the open so Congress can fund more money and have more advanced weapons brought into this area. This is what they are trying to do right now. Now, it looks like Kiev has closed 20 crossing points on the border with Russia. Actually, 23 crossing points. And they are out there saying they do not want anyone from Russia or Ukraine going back and forth anymore. And we see under a bilateral agreement made in 2007, Russians could use a national identity document or an internal passport to travel to Ukraine, but Kiev is changing that. They're saying that's an old agreement, and it creates chaos. And it prevents the Ukrainian authorities from keeping a reliable record on how many people are coming to Ukraine. So right now, all crossing between the two countries have been shut down. And they're coming up with a new method which would allow people to go back and forth. I think they just wanted to close down the border. And we're going to have to see how Russia reacts and says, wait a minute, you're not letting people out or in of the country? We're going to have to think about this. And why are you doing this? Now, with everything that's going on with the ceasefire agreement, and there's still shelling going on with closing the border, we see that Russia and Ukraine delegations are meeting behind closed doors within the OSCE. And they're discussing we don't know what right now. And we're going to have to wait to see what they are actually talking about. Now, there was a ceremony in Maidan in Kiev commemorating the protests that happened there, basically the coup d'etat in Ukraine. And when Poroshenko got up on stage, the people there booed him. They were booing, yelling, and we can see that the people, they're not really with him. they're against him because of what everything is going on here. And we have to remember, a lot of the government officials there, especially Poroshenko, their families have left Ukraine. Ukraine's former prime minister said that, yeah, he would not exclude a state coup at this point. He said another state coup is not ruled out in Ukraine. The growing popular discontent, including among the leaders of the last year's protests, are ready to do something. Maidan leaders and field commanders are voicing their discontent more and more loudly. The situation in Ukraine has characterized by the atmosphere of fear and repression. People are afraid to voice their opinions because people are being taken away. But the movement is getting louder and louder, and I think Poroshenko knows this. And it's quite obvious when he gets on stage, people are booing him. And he must be nervous at this point. Now we see U.S. and Iraq are planning for a spring assault to retake Mosul in Iraq, to drive out the Islamic State, which is really the people of Iraq who are trying to take back their country. The Islamic State is the excuse. And the U.S. Central Command said on Thursday that the time of this assault is planned for April or May. It will support these troops with airstrikes on enemy positions. And they're saying there's about 20 to 25,000 troops ready to go ahead. And these are Mosul police officers and tribal fighters that are going to make up these forces. And along with these fighters, there's going to be counterterrorism troops, which aren't really named. So you can pretty much assume, and I hate to assume, but it's going to be U.S. troops. So they're ready to go with boots on the ground going into Mosul with air cover, with boots on the ground. And this is the first offensive, because we have to remember that they are preparing for a major, major offensive, because wherever the Islamic State is, that's where the United States government is going to go. They're just waiting for the official authorization for war, and it has not come, and they're hoping. And this is why they're continually saying, oh no, these are Iraqi forces. The U.S. is not involved in this. We can't be. But we know they're mixed in there, just like in Ukraine. Now, U.S. and Turkey, they signed an agreement to train the Free Syrian Army, which then defects to the Islamic State, which then they go ahead and they use out in Syria to take more land, to destroy the infrastructure. So we have to think about this for a second. They've signed an agreement. They're getting everything prepared. U.S. is going to send 400 troops to Turkey to help out with special operations. And we see right now the U.S. has already sent 4,000 troops to Kuwait. They're sending military assets to Kuwait depots. They're using mission creep to send about 5,000 to 6,000 soldiers into Iraq already. We see that the U.S. continually drops weapons, and they say, oh no, it was a mistake. The Islamic State got the weapons. My bad. And we know it's not a mistake. They do it on purpose because it is the proxy army. We see as they continually bombarding Syria with 16,000 airstrikes, the Islamic State, their territory is 3 times larger. Now they have given the Free Syrian Army, or the Islamic State, the ability to call in airstrikes while Obama waits for the authorization for war. Can you imagine what's going to happen when they have the authorization for war? This is going to be World War III here. This is going to be an all-out offensive. Let me ask you, since the Free Syrian Army / the Islamic State has the ability to call in airstrikes, what happens if the Free Syrian Army decides to call in airstrikes against Assad's forces? What happens then? Because you know it's going to happen. And what happens when Syria responds to them and hits back? Will the United States then join in? Is this the catalyst that they want to happen? Think about it. Now we see the Syrian rebels, they created a new weapon. The rebels fire propane gas cylinders from a howitzer cannon. They call it the hell cannon. And the range is about a mile. And I have a picture on the x22report.com, and those people on YouTube, I have a picture there. And basically, it kind of looks like the same type of missile device that they delivered the sarin gas to the Syrian areas where they said it was Assad, but it was really the rebels. And we can see they create these weapons to lob different projectiles far distances. Now, the United States government, central bankers, are saying that the Islamic State is winning the digital age, and we can see the U.S. government officials announce plans to expand its agency tasks with countering the Islamic State. Basically, what they're going to do is they're going to try to lock down the internet, to try to remove a lot of people talking about different things, because they're saying a lot of this online propaganda turns normal people into terrorists. Of course, they have no proof of this, but they're trying to convince everyone that, yes, this is what happens. And I saw on CNN, and it's all over the internet now, that the Islamic State is luring women in with kittens and Nutella. I mean, this is just getting absolutely ridiculous. Now, the DHS is out there, and we know that they're trying to get funding from Congress, and of course, they're making up all these different things, and they have new intelligence right now, and this is for many, many different agendas, not just because they need funding. They're saying that their new report produced by the Department of Homeland Security and the Federal Bureau of Investigation is calling attention to an apparent domestic terror threat from the right-wing sovereign citizen extremists. The report claims that there have been 24 sovereign citizen attacks in the United States since 2010. According to that's really not that many. According to these reports, these extremists believe they are not bound by the law and will assert their rights on regular basis when confronted by police. This could be like a traffic stop or refusing to obey court orders. You mean like the government officials, like the FBI, the NSA, the CIA? They all do this. Basically what they're saying is that the everyday American who's trying and looking at their rights are saying, listen, no, we're not going along with this. These are the people they are going after. Those people who are waking up to mass surveillance and the police coming down on the people, asking them to do things which is completely against their rights. They're starting to speak up, and the government doesn't like this. This is what they're doing. They're calling everyday people domestic terrorists. The U.S. government's search for domestic extremists is likely to net innocent individuals who are not pursuing violence, but rather simply attempting to live free of the government interference in their lives. But they don't want this. They want everyone to obey. And they have a map of where all this is. I mean, it's in Florida. It's in Texas. It's in California. It's all around the country. It's popping up everywhere. We can't control it. And now you know why they're trying to ban weapons. Now you know why they're trying to take away everyone's rights and control the people, because they know what is coming. And that is the collapse of the entire system. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.